CZ75 and Jericho.
75 first. .75 is down. And Jericho.
Hi, Misha here, and as you saw, we have these two guns, the CZ75B and the Jericho 941 polymer framed version. And Jay, when we went to the range last time, asked me to bring both out because he was considering which one to buy. And this is going to be kind of a discussion video of the pros and cons of each and why he decided to buy the one he did. So you saw some shooting footage already. Let's get back to the range, run a few more mags through each, and then Jay will join me at the table for the CZ-75. Jericho. CZ-75B. Alrighty, back at the table.
Hey everybody, it's Jay.
So the CZ-75, a few of you have asked me to do a history on, and I don't really exactly know what to say. For one thing, this is large, at least most of the variations have been commercial. Although there has been a lot of military use. Surprisingly, not a lot in Czechoslovakia back in the day. This was mostly an export. This was designed in the early to mid 70s and went into production, the original 75 version, in 1976. And this is considered one of the first Wonder 9s. It fires 9x19 parabellum. It uses a detaching double stack mag, originally 15 rounds. Newer mags can hold 17 for a flush fit and 20 plus with extensions. It is a double single action system. There are various safety options, but they almost all have a manual safety. It does have a last round bolt hold or slide hold back. And one interesting feature, the rails are inside the frame, a la Swiss P210, which itself was directly inspired by the French model 1935. So it has an interesting pedigree, and it's kind of the first of its generation. It's been a hugely successful pistol, hence led to the Jericho, which is essentially a beefed up copy that started to be manufactured in Israel by IMI back in the 1990s. It too has the slide riding inside the frame. It uses the same magazines as the updated CZ-75B, and can be had in a myriad of versions. One interesting little factoid, the standard barrel length for the CZ-75 is 4.7 inches, whereas for the Jericho it is 4.4 inches. So, you know, little difference there, but not a big deal. And as you saw, that one has a polymer frame. Of course, steel was more common, but CZ has done polymer framed variants of the gun as well. So, yeah. So you were deciding
Yes.
which
And
one.
Earl is trying to help pick.
Earl really likes.
I'm not going to pick based on Earl's taste.
Why not?
He has terrible taste.
Did you lick him to know how he tastes?
I'm not going to answer that question on the grounds that might incriminate me.
Okay, pleading the fifth.
Yes.
So, yeah.
The first gun that I looked at, I've been really looking at, is the 75B, which I'll go ahead and grab here. Mostly because a local gun shop has had them, has had some used ones and stuff, and so I've been going in there and playing with those a lot. There is something about the look and the feel of these guns that's really appealing to me. Very similar to my feelings on the Beretta 92 series, which I'm going to do a video on here pretty soon, because I have a little bit of a, not a love-hate relationship, it's more of an unrequited love thing, because I love them, and for various reasons they don't necessarily love me, but I keep buying them anyway. But anyway, that's a discussion for another video. But the 75B also is really appealing to me. For one, I have a lot of Czech guns already, so it would be a good fit for that as well. They look really neat and they shoot great. They have, for basically a pretty non-modular steel frame, they have a pretty good feel in the hand. They balance pretty well, and like I said, they look cool. They look very iconic. So I've been looking at getting one of those for a while. I had the misfortune of handling a Checkmate version, which is about a $3,200 pistol. Obviously, there's no comparison really between the $550-ish versions and the $3,000 version, but it's obviously super impressed me. And pretty much ever since then, I've wanted to get even just a base model CZ75, because I like how they look, I like how they feel, and they're fit very well.
I would also add the aftermarket support's very, very good.
Yeah, they've really taken off on the U.S. commercial market. I actually feel like I hear more about them nowadays than I ever have
I would agree with that,
previously.
yeah.
It seems like there for a while you really only heard about polymer frame, safe actions or striker fired guns, and it seems like the 75Bs have had more of a maybe more people are glomming onto them or finding them. I'm not sure, but it seems like I hear about it.
I think it's because CZ is offering a lot of competition and target guns. That seems to be the niche they've found for themselves, as the more high end, where weight isn't a big deal, but being a metal frame.
The shadows that have just come out recently.
Yeah, all those stuff. Different. Yeah, I don't even pretend to know all the flavors and variants because they've really expanded.
Yep.
But.
And then we did a video a few months back of the top underrated guns. And one of the guns that made its way to that list is the Jericho 941, which I have here.
Specifically the polymer frame.
Specifically the polymer frame. It's not a gun that you hear a lot of people talk about. The very first time I even heard of it was a coworker of mine had one, and just absolutely, whenever they were brought in under the Baby Eagle designation, and just absolutely loved it and talked about how great of a gun it was, and I'd never even heard of one at the time at that point. But we did that underrated guns video, and we talked a lot about how the 941 is often, even though they're effectively the same style of gun, the 941 is often overshadowed by the CZ75. And so that kind of immediately put that into the running as far as, do I grab the 75 or do I grab the 941? Because I both like them quite a bit. There is a price difference. The Jerichos, a lot of times you can find around the $400 mark. Sometimes less if you're seeing stuff on sale. Seems a lot of times around $375, whereas the 75Bs are, what would you say, $550-ish?
I'd say $550 to $600 on the base model. I'd also say that, again, the 400 is for the polymer.
For the polymer, right. And if you go to a steel, it's a little bit more.
The steel kind of overshadowed, the 941 itself is overshadowed, and then the steel 941 tends to overshadow the polymer.
Sure. So that's why I asked Misha to bring him out, because I wanted to shoot him side by side and see, basically which one did I want to go ahead and get and pull the trigger on. Put a little bit of extra money back and get the 75B, or go ahead and grab a 941. Because I also do have some IWI guns. I have an Uzi Pro. I have 2 Galil Aces. We'll probably get an X95 someday. So it, that would, either one would fit my collection fairly well. So, but yeah, we got out to the range and did some shooting with them. If you had to pick one, I'm curious. If you had to choose one, which one would you choose?
The whole, there's such a...
You weren't expecting me to turn around on you.
No, the thing is, I've never really... They're both kind of bland to me because there's not a lot of history to either one.
Yep, makes sense.
They're very reliable 9mm guns, but in a sea of reliable 9mm guns.
Yep.
I just on the basis of history, I guess probably my favorite would be, should have brought one out, probably the steel framed Jericho, only because of just how robust it is and how pleasant it is to shoot.
Yep.
But yeah, they're all equally reliable. They all use the same mag, so that's a thing. But yeah, I'd say a steel framed, an older production steel framed. Yeah. The I mentioned some of the positives already on the CZ75, just based on my fairly limited trigger time with it. It is very smooth. It's a very smooth shooter. It balances really well, even though it's a fairly hefty steel frame gun. The balance fits more evenly. It's very evenly distributed, so it doesn't really feel like it's pulling down into your hand, but it also doesn't feel like you've got a brick hanging off the front. So it balances quite well. It's pretty ergonomic. I would say it's not really even a complaint. The trigger is a little bit different. The beaver tail is a little narrow. Controls wise, they're pretty much the same. These versions, yeah.
Yep. The Jericho.
I will point out one thing I've been wanting to say too is there's a few technical differences. The CZ75, the frame is actually cast. It's investment cast, which is fine. As far as I know, at least the older Jericho steels were still machine forged. Also, the CZ75 has a cold hammer forged barrel with standard rifling, whereas the Jericho has a hammer forged barrel with polygonal rifling.
Okay.
Differences,
Yeah, sure. I called out the trigger on this one because the trigger they're both good triggers, especially in single action. I think the double action is a little lighter on the 75. It feels a little bit smoother. The Jericho double action tends to have a little bit of a stop to it around the time that it's about to break. And it feels a little grittier, a little creepier than the 75B does. I'm not sure if that's different on the steel frame versions, but that's something that I noted shooting them back to back on the polymer. The single action trigger, however, is just a hair lighter on the Jericho. I believe it's a 5.5 pound advertised pull weight in single action, whereas the 75B is about 5.11. It's almost not. If you weren't shooting them back to back, you probably wouldn't even notice, but shooting them back to back, I actually think I like the single action trigger a little bit better on the Jericho.
It's a little lighter. I'd also say the trigger is a little wider, so that might help with not a huge amount, but I'd say it's just a tiny bit wider on the Jericho, which can help with pull.
Yep, and that actually was going to be my next point on the trigger. The Jericho trigger is a little bit more comfortable to me because it's a little bit wider. So,
the double action kind of feels like a staple gun on this one. It's like pointing at papers.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a staple gun.
It does.
Yeah. So the trigger fits my hand a little bit better. It's just a little bit wider than the trigger on the 75B.
I mean, just a tiny
just
bit.
a hair, but
yeah.
it is enough to affect the feel on
Now
it.
the hammer is a big difference.
Yep. See, the Jericho has got this kind of flat, leveled off hammer here. And the 75B has got this rounded, skeletonized hammer.
Yeah, kind of commander style.
Yep.
And again, this is just these what gets so hard to talk about any of these guns is how many different flavors, especially CZ makes. It's wild.
And for my purposes, I'm very expressly looking at entry level on both of these guns.
Yeah.
Another thing that I noticed too, and the difference between the two, the beaver tail is a little bit wider or slimmer on the 75B, and then it's quite a bit wider on the 941. And then, of course, with the polymer 941, you have these finger grooves. I actually am a finger groove fan. I know a lot of people don't like finger grooves on their handguns. I'm one of the few people that like the Gen 4 Glock. Was it Gen 4 that had the finger grooves?
What I like about the grooves on these, they're there, but they're not as pointy and deep and aggressive.
They're very round.
They're there, but they're not as you can find on some of the Glocks. Same with the texture on the grip. It's got a texture, but it's nothing.
Right.
But on the other hand, I've always liked even the stock grips. Of course, you can get aftermarkets, but I like kind of the Coke bottle shape of how it bulges and then slims top and bottom. That's always fit my hand well on the CZ75. And they're very thin grip panels, except in the middle where they bulge. But I've always liked that.
The Gen 3 Glock. I'm one of the few people that like the finger grooves on the Gen 3 Glock.
Gotcha.
Actually, it's why I bought a Gen 3 over a Gen 4. And I know that makes me wrong, but that's a personal preference thing that I actually like better. So yeah, going back to shooting them back to back, a few of the things that I mentioned with the beaver tail, I do like how the grip is on the 941 is swelled here at the bottom, but fairly thin at the top. It fits my hand a little bit better, and then like I said, the trigger is just a little bit more comfortable for me.
It's kind of like a Glock, but less of a sweep back. It has the skinnier top, and it is angled back, but not as aggressively.
Right. So overall, for now, I think the next one I get will be the 941, because for all the reasons I mentioned, it fits my hand a little bit better. I found it a little bit more comfortable to shoot, and I realize that's 100% a personal ergonomic thing. The polymer is also a lot lighter. Well, it's not a lot lighter. It's lighter. It balances a little bit heavier in the barrel. You can definitely feel the front heaviness on this compared to the 75, but I think that the polymer frame, the lightness in the polymer frame kind of makes up for it a little bit. So,
and to be fair, when the polymer gun is loaded, having that weight of the loaded magazine
will balance it a little bit more.
Does help, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, for me, I'm sticking with the 941 on this go around. Not that I think, again, not at all to discredit the 75B, because it was a very close call. And eventually I'll get a 75B as well. I'll have both. This was more of a matter of me figuring out which one I wanted to get first.
What about the sights, the iron sights?
Sights are really not significantly... I mean, so the thing with they're both 3-dot sights, which is pretty well, what you would expect on a pistol. I find the Jerichos to be a little easier to pick up. They're larger overall. You're not really going to be able to see it on camera from this distance, but they do show up a little bit easier, at least again on the base versions that we're talking about. So I think factory out of the box, the Jericho is easier for me to pick up. They stick out more. Probably wouldn't be as precise because they are quite a bit larger. But
some more combat sights.
Yeah, I would say more combat sights, which for me on a pistol is typically more important than high precision sights, because I don't really do, a lot of. I'm not shooting competitions with these, so. But yeah, so
accuracy, mini noticeable.
That's pretty much the same. The triggers. So I alluded to the fact that on the 92s, I have a little bit of problem with those. with the triggers because of the double action trigger. So for quite a few years, I had shot some double actions. I never could hit anything with them. And it wasn't until a friend of mine who's a big revolver shooter actually sat and showed me how to shoot a double action revolver that I actually got proficient enough with them that I started buying guns with double action triggers, because it was a different finger placement and practice than what I was accustomed to on single action and striker fired guns before. So accuracy, they seem to be about the same. I see how I could squeeze a little bit more precision with the smaller sights of the 75B, but I still didn't have any problems hitting clay targets at 5-10 yards with both guns. So,
yeah. Yeah, as far as smoothness of slide, I'd say they're pretty equal.
Yeah. And handling those surplus 941s that you got in, steel frame 941s, they seem to be pretty consistent in that regard as far as the smoothness goes.
They're both just, the Browning style or modified Browning style tipping barrels, typical takedown.
Yep. So,
and one reason IMI, as well as like Tanfoglio and several other companies, were able to just essentially rip off the CZ-75 was because of how copyright and patent law was in Czechoslovakia when that gun was made, essentially. So they didn't really have a lot of protection for the creators and the manufacturers, so everyone just started copying the gun because it was a good design.
Yeah.
And so you can find a ton of clones out there.
Yeah.
Much like the high power.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, eventually I'll get a 75B as well, because again, I have a lot of other Czech guns, and it seems kind of wrong not to have a Czech pistol at all, especially as many as they made.
Yeah, that's kind of why I have mine. It's absolutely nothing special. It's just the standard version, but
it's got a lanyard loop on it.
Yeah. CZ does tons of finishes, but their basic finish is just a kind of a lacquer paint, which is fine. It's a good military type finish, and stick with that.
Yeah.
But
both neat guns, both well made. I've enjoyed. That's why part of the reason why I asked you to bring them out again is because I just wanted to shoot them again. So because I like shooting both. Pretty much the first time I handled the 941, I was impressed with how it felt, and I thought it was a lot of fun to shoot. So. Yeah,
a lot of guys go for the steel, and like I said, I probably would too for more historical things. But the polymer really does get undersold. It's a very beefy polymer frame. The steel guide rails at top are very strong and reinforced. They are built to be as tough as possible. They're good guns, and they're very, very affordable.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, underrated, some might say.
Yep. And again, they use standard CZ-75 type mags, so it's not one of those deals where the mags are super expensive. Like, what's that, the Masada or whatever, their new?
Yeah, the new one, the Masada.
Yeah, that takes its own mags. I'm like, why? The Jericho takes a very common mag, and that with pistols is a big deal.
Yeah, especially, the PPQ was a good example of dropping $40 a piece on magazines, because that's...
Yeah, well, luckily at least those use the same mags as the P99.
Right.
That helps, but it's... And a lot of pistol guys today, they really like having 10 mags for their guns, especially competition guys, because of how long it takes to load them, so they want to have them loaded up and ready to go.
Yep.
So yeah, that is Jay's choice. A bit of a, I don't want to say unpopular opinion, but probably not one most would take given the option between CZ-75, Jericho steel, and Jericho polymer.
Yeah, I just like the way it fits in my hand. And
yeah, he always has.
Pistol fitting is a huge part of pistol buying. Like, you're way more likely, most people are way more likely to grab the first gun that fits their hand really well over the brand that they're really familiar with that just doesn't feel good in their hand.
Yeah, I have a lot of customers asking me which gun to get, the HK, the Walther, the SIG, the Glock, the whatever, and I really can't tell them because everyone has different...
You have to have your hands on it.
Yeah, you really do.
Yep.
It's just each one, ergonomics, control placement, shape, It's all different.
Yep.
But no, the Jericho is it really is still underappreciated.
Yeah. Yeah, cool guns. Really like them.
So yeah, he was making that decision at the range, so we thought we would have kind of this discussion at the table about the range, and there you go. That is Jay's call and where he will be placing his next gun purchase.
Yep, for sure. So
any final thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I think, it's just like I said, I don't. Hopefully, it didn't come off as discrediting this 75B. A lot of things that I discussed were things that are specific to me and my taste. And again, this was purely a edge of the knife decision because they are so similar and they're both very good. So, and then like I said, I'll have both eventually. But the 941 is the one that I'll probably enjoy shooting a little bit more in the short term. So, I don't want to seem like I'm like, the 75B is not good compared to the 941 because it's not. It's
and again, we're talking baseline models here, not your high end or even middle grade race gun. Those, right. But then you're talking $1,000 up. So
exactly. But so we'll start getting into 75B Czech gun collecting.
One thing I will say, just to add, the aftermarket support for Jericho isn't anything like it is for CZ. So if you want to make a custom gun, you will want to go with the CZ. I'm not saying there's no aftermarket for the Jericho, but it's much better on the CZ.
Yeah. Yep. And this is going to be a range gun for me, so it'll be whatever is in the box is what I'll stick with for the most part with it. So
yeah.
Alrighty,
guys, this is Misha.
And this is Jake.
And if you could like, share, and subscribe, and check out the link to our Patreon page if you'd like to help support the channel.
Yep, for sure.
We'll catch you very soon next time.
See ya.